the last day of the series or whatever that we've been preaching about Christian atheism is that there are people that believe in God but don't believe in his church. Right? There are so many people that think, well, I can do this God thing all by myself. But I got news for you, that's a lie. How many of y'all remember Herschel Walker that played for the Cowboys for a hot minute, right? And I remember because I was in the middle of my football career, man. I was just getting started, and it wasn't much of a career. But, man, everybody talk about Herschel Walker, and you know what they said about Herschel Walker? Man, never went to the gym. He did everything on his own. He did 1,500 push-ups a day and 700 sit-ups a day. And this isn't, I mean, this was talked about all the time. But can I tell you that there's not a lot of Herschel Walkers out there, right? People that will get up and be disciplined and say that I don't need anybody to teach me the word, that I don't need anybody to show me the ways of righteousness. I can do it all by myself. And let me prove it to you. Herschel Walker, amazing, phenomenal athletic talent, won Heisman trophies, came into the NFL, and when he was with the Cowboys, he was a phenomenal player. But you know what the Cowboys didn't do? Win. What did they do? Some of y'all could care less. But I'm going to tell you what the Cowboys did is they traded Herschel Walker away, and they got all these draft picks, and they drafted all these people that nobody had ever heard of. And they got this little guy named Emmitt Smith from the University of Florida who was slow and undersized and everything else. But you know what he was good at? Being part of a team. Right? And he came in, and maybe his regimen wasn't the same. Maybe he didn't do 1,700 pull-ups or whatever it was that Herschel Walker did. But he was willing to buy into the idea that I am less by myself than I am as a part of a whole. And when we can understand that that's the way God created the church, because we have to become less so that he might become more. We have to become less because I can certainly, listen, I've gone through that season. When we left the church in Abilene, I had my little guitar, Pastor Brian. I wasn't very good at it. I'm still not great. But I had my little guitar, and I was like, we could lead worship in our own home, and we know we can teach our kids the gospel. But we said no. Because there's something about what Hebrews 10:25 says, that we should not forsake the assembling of ourselves together, as some is in the habit of doing. And if you go back, and I have it in my notes here, but if you go back before that in Hebrews 10:24, it sets that verse up. See, God always had a plan because he knew church was going to be fallible. Okay? In Matthew chapter 18, he even lays out rules for how you're supposed to resolve conflict in church. How many of y'all have ever heard of conflict in church? Do you think if God was surprised, he would have put instructions on how to deal with this issue? Paul comes up with ideas and reasons why he says, go to your brother. Don't let something linger overnight, because that will do everything it can to disseminate you away from the place where you can be strong, the place where you can be encouraged, the place where people are pouring into your life. Because I got news for you. If you can go home and you can be the best Christian by yourself, if that story about Michael and those kids, he would have been awesome to go home and do everything by himself. But what did he do? He said, no, I got to share it. It becomes a bigger part, because at some point you can look across the table and you can go, that's family. I am no longer me, but I'm Christ who lives in me. And Christ says, who's my family? It's not my mom or my dad. It's those who are here doing what I've called him to do to this appointed time. See, going to church, just saying, oh, I want to go to that church. You talked about it, Krista. We pass. You know, I forget the count now, Pastor, but there's been as many as 70 churches in our little town. I don't know what the number is today. I do not care. Because there's buildings all over the place. But the Bible describes people and buildings that don't do anything, that are hollow inside, as sepulchers, as whited and empty tombs. The only empty tomb I'm concerned about is the one Jesus came out of. Because that's the only one that redeems us from this place of ourself, thinking I can do it by myself. I can work on myself while I look at myself and read my Self magazine. That's a joke I did not write. But We're guilty of it. And I'm going to tell you, even if you're amazing at the worship on your own, and you're amazing at understanding the Bible on your own, you know why you're amazing at it? Because God wants you to go tell it to somebody else. He wants you to be the church. If we're going to church, we're a consumer, but when we're being the church, we're a contributor. Right? If we're going to church, we're a spectator. If we're being the church, we're a participant. It's not a weekly event, it's a daily calling to be part of the church. So how do we do that? It's very simple. We have to understand. Listen, I could preach this message and you can get all fired up and you can go join some other church for all I care. I want you involved in the work of the kingdom. We know missionaries that we support. Holly Tucker is one that's back there. She did her first support. We supported the mission for her to go to Spain, and she did children's ministry and all these things there. But when she came back, they said, we really need somebody like you in Wales. Will you please consider joining our team? And so she has this calling to go to all these different places. And some of us go, man, there ain't no way I could go there. But what I could tell you is that you do go when you support, you do go when you pray, because they can't do it alone. And guess what? The church was never meant to be you all by yourself. In the end of the book, there's a text, Matthew chapter 16, in verse 25. And I don't even know if I have that up there, Tony. Will you pull it up? Matthew 16, 25. Actually, I'm going to go to verse 24. I'm sorry. Jesus said to his disciples, if any of you wants to be my follower, I said that real West Texas. You wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross and follow me. For if you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world and lose your own soul? How many people have you seen? And I'm talking about pastors, I'm talking about your neighbors, I'm talking about your friends, that they had everything to show for it, but then they gave up the one thing that was the most valuable, and that was their soul, their eternity. Now, God has grace, and I pray for grace all the time for those that have fallen, but there's a challenge that I feel like it was a powerful challenge that Pastor Craig talked about in his book, and I would just reissue the same challenge. And he calls it the third line faith. He says the first line, God gave him this vision of 3 lines in the sand. And he challenged him. He said the first line is, I believe in God enough to benefit from him. Business relationships, cultural standing. My kids act a little better when I keep them in kids' church. Like there's a place where you cross that first line and says, I'll believe as long as it adds benefit to my life. The second line says, I'll believe and I'll even contribute. When that basket goes by me, I'll put a few dollars in there. I'm good with that. I'll buy some school supplies for the school supply drive at the beginning of the next month or whatever. But man, I'm going to serve a little. I might give a little. But the third line, and this is, I'm sorry, it's not just pastors and it's not missionaries and it's not evangelists and just those people that are talked about, but that third line says, I believe enough to give my life because Christ demonstrated his love for us in this, that while we were yet sinners, he died for you. He died for me. And while he didn't know, that's the wrong term, that's heresy. He knew. But while we have yet to understand and discover what that means in our life, can I tell you that we might not be able to determine everything about ourselves, but we can determine a choice to say, God, I say yes. God, I pray and I say yes. Because I don't know here's the thing is, I will admit, we all get scared because we're like, God, what if you send me? Yeah. What if I have to walk 3 miles to talk to somebody? That doesn't sound like the gospel at all to me. But maybe I would be in a lot better shape if I would go out and walk 3 miles and talk to people and drink tea instead of Dr. Pepper. But don't be afraid of what God is calling you to do, because if you'll cross that third line, if we would be all willing to say, God, I'm not worried about the name out on the building. I'm not worried about us building a big bright LED sign that they can see from over here at the stadium. What I'm worried about is that the people that come in contact with this particular body know how to pray, and that they know how to fast, and that they know how to believe Jesus Christ for their healing and for salvation and for provision. Because I got news for you. He sent us here, and he didn't expect for us to want to be here. We're just passing through. This is all but for a moment. But yet there's a glory that we will ascribe to. And I'm thankful that I'm going to be there with you. I'm thankful that I'm going to be there with Michael. I'm thankful that I'm going to be there with all of these people that we have ministered to through one way or the other.